The absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. His Majesty's government has announced £14 billion for nuclear investment, proving what we all knew to be true, that renewable energy is not enough. Meanwhile, as blasphemy laws return to the UK, with a man being convicted of burning a Quran, I'll be joined by the Tory MP Nick Timothy, whose new bill aims to save freedom of speech. A GB News exclusive has revealed a young boy was given a detention for reading out a joke from a Roald Dahl book. The boy and his father join me shortly. Plus, legendary British author Frederick Forsyth has died aged 86, and it was this programme that brought you his last ever interview. So tonight, we will be airing it in his honour. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most pugnacious panel, the former Conservative MP, Michael Brown, and the political journalist, Michael Crick. As always, I want to know your views. Mail Mogg@gbnews.com. But now, it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Mark White.
Good evening. The main headlines from the GB News Centre. The number of people killed by a gunman in a shooting rampage at an Austrian secondary school has risen to 10 after another victim died in hospital this evening. The attacker, who also killed himself, was a 21-year-old man from the city of Graz. He was a former pupil at the school. Police say he used a handgun and a long-barrelled weapon to carry out the attack. President Trump has defended his decision to send in the National Guard and the Marines to provide support to immigration enforcement officers in Los Angeles. Donald Trump claimed LA was under siege and accused protesters of being paid agitators after several days of violence.
You would have had a horrible situation had I not sent them in. Horrible. You'd be reporting on a lot of death and a lot of destruction that's not going to take place. I think if you look, every night it got less and less. They were met with very strong force, the bad people, the bad, sick people that do what they do. But these are paid people in many cases, not in all cases, but in many cases. And they really are, they're agitators.
The UK government is sanctioning 2 Israeli government ministers, claiming they've repeatedly incited violence against Palestinian civilians. The Foreign Office said Britain will join several other countries in imposing sanctions on ministers Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. They're being sanctioned in their personal capacities and subject to a freeze on any UK assets, disqualification from holding UK directorships, as well as a ban on entering the country. Reform UK have announced their new chairman after the shock resignation of Zia Youssef last week. Dr David Bull is a former deputy chair of the party, TV presenter and long-term ally of Nigel Farage. He spoke earlier with Michelle Dewberry about his new role.
We are now the fastest growing party in British political history, so we've split the role into a number of sort of modalities. My job is going to be predominantly externally facing. The lifeblood of any party is going to be the volunteer base. So we've got amazing men and women across the country who go out, deliver leaflets, campaign, set up market stalls. In terrible weather, I've done it. I've campaigned a lot.
The Prime Minister has met with the families of the Southport victims today and promised £5 million in funding for a memorial garden. Alongside Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, the PM spoke to the families of Bibi King, Elsie Stancombe and Alice Aguirre in Downing Street. The garden will reflect the girls' shared love of dance, music and the arts. That's it. You're right up to date with the latest headlines. We'll have more for you in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. Yesterday marked an admission from the Labour government.
We had to make difficult decisions last year. The public finances were in a total mess when I became Chancellor last summer, and we had to take immediate action to get control and get a grip of the public finances. We have been able to do that. We've returned stability to the economy. In the first quarter of this year, our economy was the fastest growing in all of the G7, which now means we're able to make different choices. And that's why today I can announce that this winter, 9 million pensioners will now receive the winter fuel payment.
It has to be said, even by politicians' standards, that was an awful lot of old tosh badly spun and effectively an admission that the brutal cut to the winter fuel allowance was entirely unnecessary. Well, today the government made an even bigger admission, one that runs in contradiction to one of their favourite projects. The Labour government has admitted that their net zero plans are basically a con. This may sound like welcome news, and in many ways it is. It also represents the subtle admission that the 2030 grid decarbonisation plan will fail. But what happened to the Labour Party that promised green energy alone would be able to provide enough energy for the entire grid at lower prices than we have now?
The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
By 2030, with Labour, we'll have clean power powering every community.
Well, that was marvellous singing, rather better than mine, it has to be said. But this new announcement, Ed Miliband's answer to high energy costs, has been blown away by the wind. This admission is far more troubling than you may think. Not only does it clearly imply that the government is worried, as many have been warning for years, what would happen when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow in a decarbonised grid from 2030, but Sizewell C won't even be up and running until midway through the next decade. In other words, we are looking at 5 years of expensive and unreliable energy with a very serious prospect of intermittent blackouts. If the government was serious about lowering energy bills, it would reopen drilling in the North Sea, it would lift the fracking moratorium, reopen the coal mines and create a genuinely free energy market that would drive down consumer and industrial prices. So while the government may be running scared with this new nuclear power spending, make no mistake that its energy plan will blast the country back into the darkest, coldest and poorest days of the 1970s. As ever, let me know your views via mailmog@gbnews.com. I'm now joined by a particularly distinguished panel, perhaps not as pugnacious as it sometimes is, the former Conservative MP Michael Brown and the author and journalist Michael Crick. Michael.
So you're saying that Michael Brown is less pugnacious than Kelvin is?
He's slightly politer, I think. I think
I agree with that, yeah.
But you're still pretty pugnacious. So can you defend Ed Miliband? I mean, it does mean his promise isn't going to happen. It can't happen.
Well, I certainly will defend Ed Miliband. He's doing a sterling job. And, yeah, it's possible we won't get to net zero by 2050 or
decarbonise the grid by 2030, which is promising.
But these are targets which we're going to do our best to achieve, despite the sort of constant carping from the sidelines by these carbon-using obsessives like your good self. And, I've said to you before, I may have a plan to lose weight and hit, say, 73 kilos by the end of the year. Well, in reality, I probably won't achieve it, but I'm going to give it a go because that has an advantage in itself. And it may well be that it doesn't happen in 2050. Who knows? It's a long way off. But it will almost certainly happen in 2060. And in any case, we're signed up to this. It was an agreement.
You'll be 73 kilos by 2060.
Sorry?
You'll be 73 kilos by 2060. We don't know what kilograms are on this programme. We prefer stones, don't we, Michael? And we prefer the realism of government policy that means you get things done rather than you have airy-fairy targets that you're not going to meet.
Exactly. Now, I'm delighted to say that I will be able to disagree with Michael on this issue because you will recall, Jacob, that during the time of Mrs Thatcher, the whole of the Conservative Party was pretty pro-nuclear, but there was one MP and one MP only, myself, who had the burden to carry of going to have the nation's nuclear waste dumped in my constituency. And overnight, that threat reduced reduced the value of everybody's houses by about 50%. And I made a speech in the House of Commons where I told the Speaker and the House that there would never be any nuclear waste disposed of in my constituency so long as I was the MP. I had 649 MPs who couldn't care less, and I won my battle because when I went to see Mrs Thatcher, she told me that I was only there because she had won the previous 1983 general election. And I said, no, Prime Minister, you're only there because I have to hold my seat in order for you to remain there. The discussion ended.
Brave, aren't you?
The discussion ended very frostily, and 3 weeks later, it was just before the 1987 general election was called, nuclear waste was abandoned, and she blamed me forever until the day she died for killing the nation's nuclear programme. So I still maintain that there are not as many benefits to the nuclear power industry as Michael would like to suggest.
I don't think either of you understand just how serious climate change is. I mean, do you believe in climate change, either of you, or do you just think it's a myth?
Let me jump in quickly. If we are merely exporting all our CO2 emissions to China, every piece of steel that we import into this country, which we should be doing pretty well most of the time, has been made with power station, coal-fired power stations. You can only make steel by means of virgin steel, which means coking coal. And so we're simply exporting everything that is imported into this country to China and countries like that. So we're not going to reduce the net zero in the whole world.
I mean, there are bound to be anomalies like that, and we should avoid that. But don't you think we should do the very best we can to have a complete array of different forms of energy, avoid carbon because of the damage, the huge damage that is clearly already doing to the planet, and there's a lot more on the way, and the repercussions like greater viruses are much more likely to thrive when under a higher temperature. When Africa becomes uninhabitable, you'll get a lot more refugees coming to this country, something that concerns all of us, but you two especially.
No, Michael, I don't agree.
Don't you?
First of all, the price of electricity to make steel and heavy industry in this country is twice what it is in Europe, and it's 4 times, and America does it for a quarter of the price. So our car industry will, in my view, disappear very shortly. Not only the steel industry, but the car industry.
That's all to do with the electricity pricing mechanism. The goal is to reduce our dependence on carbon to net zero.
Yeah, but Michael, you're stunningly honest. But actually the proponents of this energy policy aren't. You're recognising that if we want to get to net zero, we have to make really tough economic sacrifices. What the Green lobby are pretending is that we can get there without doing that.
No,
and I just think this is nonsense.
I don't necessarily think they are economic sacrifices, because there are economic opportunities
but there
as well.
aren't. None of those have been identified.
Well, in developing new forms of energy, for instance, this new nuclear power station will involve, what, 10,000 jobs?
Yeah, we need nuclear power, potentially, regardless of whether we decarbonise, because it's a very good way of providing base load. This may be a rather expensive way of doing it.
And the other thing is, Jacob, OK, the target is to have it open in 10 years. You and I know that it will be 20 years at the earliest before this happens. The other nuclear power station, I've forgotten Hinkley Point, I mean, that has shown no signs of coming to fruition any time soon. And that's been on the stocks now for, what, 15 years, 10, 15 years?
Well, I think that the more variety we can have in our energy sources in this country, the quicker we can get to net zero, and we can set an example to the world, and we can fulfil our obligations under the Paris Treaty.
Where I fundamentally disagree with you is I think economic development leads to cleaner energy. It has done historically from the earliest times. The biggest decrease in carbon emissions in the United States has been
throughout the last 200 years.
We've got much cleaner. We've got much cleaner.
Well, I think
because we've gone from burning wood to burning coal to burning oil to burning gas. Gas is much cleaner than wood. All of this has been an enormous development.
I don't think it's inevitable. And the development, for instance, of the car industry, which was one of the huge drivers of all the world's economies in the last century, didn't do much for... did terrible things.
What do you think the power is used... What form of power do you reckon is used in China to manufacture the lithium batteries, the wind
picture
turbines?
Is a mixed one, isn't it? They're opening lots of coal-powered fire stations.
Every week?
Yeah, but at the same time, they're also developing all sorts of alternative sources of energy, and you know, we've got stuff to learn from
far more than we will ever do.
If you go around this world as a human being saying, well, they're all doing it, so I might as well.
So we might as well ruin ourselves.
Immoral society.
We will ruin ourselves by reducing our manufacturing base even further.
All right, well, this panel's pretty pugnacious too, isn't it? Calvin, if you're watching, they're learning from you. Next, I'll be speaking to the Conservative MP who has a plan to save free speech following last week's disturbing return of blasphemy laws after a man burned a Quran in public.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Well, there's a reason it's called school term, and that is all those little kids should be at school, not elsewhere. Now, I know a lot of people find that difficult to comprehend because they're thinking, well, that doesn't suit me and it's cheaper to go then and whatever it is. But in my whole life, my parents would never have said, take 2 weeks off school or take a week off school. No. So I find this very, very hard it just shouldn't be part of the equation. You're at school, you're not on holiday.
Well, lots of parents would say, wouldn't they? They can't afford to take their children in half term because the flights have tripled.
Totally agree, but we couldn't afford it. So what did we do? We went to the local beaches in Ireland. That's what we went. So that's how you had your holiday.
So you just forego a foreign holiday.
Hold on, so the prices go, but the prices are going up. They make them more expensive
during the
summer holidays.
So
they take them out of school. So you get parents that will take them out of school during school term because the prices are so expensive during summer holidays, which makes it unfair.
We're not stupid. We understand that, but the law says you have to be at school.
Right, I agree with that. But don't you think it's disgusting that the price is so much more expensive, and that's the reason people are considering
It's not really relevant, is what I'm saying, because the rules say you're not available for these holidays, so you're at school.
Yeah. Right.
But the companies shouldn't be doing that, should they?
Look,
I don't think they should. I don't think they should be allowed to.
I agree. I think it's
the only rule that comes first is that is school term. School term means that's what the law requires you to do. Be at school, not be on a beach in Ibiza.
But the temptation is there if it's so much cheaper and you couldn't afford to go during the summer holidays. I've never done that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Last Monday, a man was convicted of a religiously aggravated public order offence after he burned the Quran outside the Turkish embassy. My guest today announced his private member's bill in Parliament, which seeks to exempt the criticism of religion from our harassment laws. Here was Nick Timothy in the Chamber of the House of Commons earlier today.
In doing so, this bill would restore free speech as it applies to religion in England and Wales. It would stop the police, prosecutors and judges from creating a blasphemy law from legislation that was never passed for that purpose. It would send the strongest powerful message from this place, where political power legitimately and democratically resides, that this country will not tolerate intimidation, violence or censorship, that there will be no special treatment here for Islam, and there will be no surrender to the thugs who want to impose their beliefs and culture on the rest of us.
Well, I'm joined now by the Conservative MP in question, Nick Timothy, as well as my panel, the former Conservative MP, Michael Brown, and the author and journalist, Michael Crick. Nick, thank you very much for coming in. What are you trying to achieve with this bill? Is it specifically really to take away protections from Islam? Or do you think there's any risk of blasphemy laws for any other religions?
Well, I think the law is obviously blind. No laws specify that a particular measure might be about one religion or another. But what's happening at the moment, despite the fact that Parliament repealed blasphemy laws many years ago, the Public Order Act is being used to effectively prosecute people for blasphemy. And what's perverse about that is that the prosecutions are punishing people who are speaking out and criticising religion because of an anticipated violent reaction from others. Which actually, I think if you applied that kind of logic to any other law, you would say that was wrong. It's victim shaming and so on. And the reason it is more specifically in practice about Islam than other religions is because since at least 1988 and the Satanic Verses controversy and several other incidents since then, there has been a tendency to protest in an intimidating way, sometimes to be obviously violent when groups of Muslims have been offended by people doing things that they consider to be blasphemous.
But how would you deal with Judaism, where anti-Semitism can come in many forms, and there needs to be a protection against anti-Semitism, but not a protection from criticising what I would call the Old Testament? How do you cope with that tension in taking any form of blasphemy out of public order bills?
Well, to be honest, I actually don't think that that's that complicated. So we have laws that prohibit racial hatred and racially aggravated offences, which would apply to Jewish people, for example, but it might also apply to anti-Muslim hatred because we have religious hatred laws as well. But we're talking about criticising ideas and beliefs, and that hasn't been illegal in this country for many years.
I understand that, but doesn't anti-Semitism often come out in perhaps some of the criticism of some of the practices of Jewish people and saying that not eating certain foods or following some of the rules of the early books of the Bible is a foolish thing to do, and that can very easily allied into anti-Semitism?
Well, look, I think if people want to criticise particular religious traditions or practices, they might even do it in an unpleasant way and in a way that some people find offensive, but that doesn't necessarily mean it should be criminal.
What if you say that the Quran encourages terrorism and therefore we should be very cautious about Muslims? Is that attacking views or is that attacking Muslims?
Well, I think this is actually one of the things that happened in the case outside the Turkish consulate, where the protester said that Islam was a religion of terrorism. Now, obviously, that's an offensive thing to say to many Muslims. I would argue that that is not something that should be criminal. It's not inciting violence towards anybody. And broadly speaking, that is where I would draw the line between criticising sets of beliefs and the traditions and practices of a particular faith versus inciting people to commit acts of violence.
What if you were to take St Matthew's Gospel that says his blood be on our hands and on the hands of our children, and you were to say that that meant that the Jewish people were responsible for the death of Christ? Is that something you're allowed to say, or does that border into anti-Semitism?
Well, I think there are some people who use texts from the Bible in order to be anti-Semitic. I don't think any text from the Bible, repeating it, reading it aloud, whatever, should ever be criminalised.
And that ultimately freedom is the most important thing, and that it is fundamentally wrong and your law would stop other laws being used to have the effect of preventing people criticising ideas and the consequences of those ideas, because you can't really separate the two.
Yeah, so actually I have quite a neat solution, which is in Part 3 of the Public Order Act, which relates to racial and religious hatred. There is a clause, 29J, which says that nothing in that part of the Act should prohibit any kind of criticism, mockery, insults, whatever, about religious ideas or causing offence to the adherents of a particular religion. But it only applies to that part of the Act. My solution is to apply it to the whole Act and also to the Communications Act and the Malicious Communications Act, which are also sometimes used to police speech online.
All right. Well, Nick, thank you very much. Let me bring in the two Michaels. How easy is it to make this differentiation? And I thought the case last week of the man who burnt the Quran was not actually as straightforward as I initially thought it was. When I first heard about it, I thought it was an attack on freedom of speech. And then the more I heard about it, it seemed he'd gone out of his way to cause as much trouble as possible.
Well, let's start from Tim's opening sentence in his excellent article in the Times this morning. It's a free country. And so far as possible, freedom of speech must trump everything else. We did get rid of the blasphemy laws some years ago, but I share a certain misgiving which you've just alluded to, Jacob. I mean, I believe that all the religions of the world, Judaism, Christianity, Muslims, Sikhs, and all the other similar religions should burning a book and inciting is one thing, but freedom of speech, I think, does have to be protected.
Let me ask Michael
and in the past.
Let me ask the other Michael one question quickly, because we're very short on time. Do we need to protect minority religions more than we protect the majority Christian religion in this country because it's a minority religion?
Well, I'm not sure, actually. Christianity is the biggest religion in the country at the moment, is it? Or at least the number of people who say their adherence is probably higher, but the number of people who actually practice it. And so, anyway, in any case, the answer, I don't think we should protect them in that way. I mean, I think the essential dividing line is isn't it, attacking the ideas of the religion and what the texts say and all of that. That's akin to attacking somebody's political views. But attacking somebody for being a Muslim or being a Jew or being a Christian, I think it should be punishable.
All right.
But I don't know if it's as simple as that. Nick will probably tell us it isn't.
Thank you very much to Nick and to my panel. I never mind about people attacking the Catholic Church because there's a higher authority who will judge them later on. In a moment, it's a GB News exclusive. I will be joined by the young boy who was given a detention simply for reading out a joke from his Roald Dahl book from his school library.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Plenty of summer warmth and sunny skies over the Mediterranean at the moment. A few thunderstorms brewing up over northern parts of Spain and temperatures on the rise in Italy. Sunny skies for most of the Greek islands. Not too hot here as the breeze is coming down from the north. Temperatures ticking up in Rome into the mid-30s perhaps by the end of the week. There are those heavy showers across northern Spain, parts of northern Portugal also seeing some downpours. But Lisbon, I think, set fair and temperatures, as I said, rising into the mid-30s in Rome later this week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here with the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Clear skies overnight for most of us, followed by a warm and sunny Wednesday, but with increasing humidity, always the chance of some thunderstorms later on. Now, at the moment, the weather patterns are shifting around, and as a result, we'll see high pressure move into the south, clearing the skies, although some low cloud will remain across the far south and southwest, and some cloud will return to Northern Ireland and western Scotland, outbreaks of mostly light rain and drizzle for the Outer Hebrides. For the vast majority, however, it is a clear and dry night, and under those clear skies, temperatures will fall into the mid-single figures in places, so certainly a cool start to Wednesday. Plenty of sunshine, however, bright skies for much of Scotland, but for the northwest, I think we'll start the day with low cloud and outbreaks of rain and drizzle. That is going to clear through the morning. Northern Ireland, likewise, a lot of cloud, particularly across western areas. I think some early sunshine for Belfast, but widely across England and Wales, we've got the sunshine from the word go, except south of the M4 corridor where we do have some lingering cloud. Now that's going to lift and break, and some of it will drift north through the morning, so patches of cloud here and there, but on the whole, England, Wales, central, southern and eastern Scotland, bright skies. And with a change in wind direction, we're going to see those temperatures shoot up. 25 Celsius widely, 26 or 27 in a few spots, particularly through the Midlands and into northwest England. But with humidity climbing, we're going to see some thunderstorms arrive in from the west on Wednesday night. And that will turn into a more general area of rain, reaching western parts of the UK during Thursday. It tends to fizzle away, but there'll be some very wet weather towards the northwest in particular. Then into Friday, further thunderstorms are likely, although in the east it will be particularly hot. Those thunderstorms clear through the weekend with fresher air returning.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country. There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor. Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So, have British schools turned into an Orwellian nightmare? Well, a GB News exclusive has revealed that a young boy of 12 was given detention simply for reading out a joke from a Roald Dahl novel. The joke is as follows. Why is it difficult to make telephone calls in China? Because there are so many wings and so many wongs, you might wing the wong number. And while anyone can see that it's simply a matter of wordplay, the school insisted it was a racist joke. I'm joined now by the young gentleman in question, Andre Braggin, along with his father, Greg Grimmer. Andre, thank you very much for coming in. So tell me the circumstances in which you told this joke.
So it was an average Latin lesson, and I was whispering to my friend, and I said, do you want to hear a joke? And I explained the joke, and after class, the teacher obviously heard me. I was held back, and the head of classics came, and they both badgered me and bullied me into thinking and saying, do you know why the joke is racist? But I said that I don't know why the joke is racist, but they kept on badgering and bullying me and made me a victim.
And you had no intention of telling a racist joke, you were just repeating something from a Roald Dahl story?
Yes, this one right here.
So which one is that? Charlie in the Great Glass Elevator,
yes.
Which I remember reading, indeed not just reading to myself, but reading to my children. It's a really good book, it's a gripping story.
Yes.
And it was in the school library.
It was in the school library, and I think quite a lot of other people have drawn it, so other people have read it.
And it's a well-read, popular book. Do you think, did your schoolmasters know where this book had come from, where the joke had come from?
No, I don't think they knew, but yeah, I don't think they knew.
And then what happened? So they had a go at you, they criticised you, they tried to persuade you this was a racist joke. And then why did you get given the detention? Was that for telling the joke?
That was for telling the joke, and it was being racist, which it wasn't. But I didn't attend the detention until they explained to me why the joke was racist. So in the end, I didn't have to attend the lunchtime detention.
Because they never explained?
OK, they didn't explain. But it's actually quite hard to see why it is racist. It's a word play on Chinese names. In fact, I'm not sure there are many people in China called Wing, as it happens. I mean, there may be. But it seems a very odd... It's as if they were looking for trouble. Do you find at your school that people are looking for this type of disciplinary activity to really say that things that are ordinary conversation are racist? Are they looking for equalities issues?
Well, I could see that they kind of are, but they kind of not too. Other people, other dads in the school, also their sons have been like bullied and badgered, and but they're just too scared to speak up and stand and fight against them.
And you've been willing to speak up. How did you come to speak up about it? And
well,
your father?
When I got my 2-hour detention, my dad asked me what's it for, and I told him that I'd explain the joke, and he said that it's not racist. So he emailed my head of classics teacher explaining why is it racist, and they couldn't give a proper explanation. And he said that I'm not going to attend the joke until you actually explain why the joke is racist.
which they then weren't able to do.
No, they declined to do it.
And can I ask, have you had a pretty good disciplinary record otherwise? You seem a pretty clever young chap. You're working hard and doing well. And what's the latest book you've got out of the library?
This is 1984, and I got this morning, and I'm halfway through chapter 1. And it just reminds me that, like, know your enemies, because the society is kind of the society used to be, or would be, in 1984.
And since this happened, have you had any understanding of why they did it? What pressure was on them to make them behave in this way?
I don't really know, to be honest.
Greg, what do you think? I mean, is this a problem with society generally, that we become too hair-trigger on accusations of racism?
I mean, to some degree, I have sympathy with them in that I think they are brainwashed themselves, and the brainwashing then continues. So they go to universities where everyone's hypersensitive, and then they are hypersensitive, and everyone around them is hypersensitive. The entire teaching profession is hypersensitive. Anyone who's not hypersensitive is squeezed out, and the thing becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's one problem. But I think at the same time, while I do feel sorry that they've gone through and they've been brainwashed by the university system, at the same time, they can't then continue. We can't continue down this line, because otherwise you won't be able to tell jokes about anything, because potentially, if you're going to be hypersensitive, everything's offensive. Comedy will be dead. Jokes will be dead. Schoolboy banter will be dead. Everyone will be on tenterhooks, thinking, can I say this? Can I mention something in Shakespeare? Can I talk about the Merchant of Venice? Or, is that anti-Jewish? And this is the ridiculous thing about it. So I've really said to the school, look, I'm happy for him to serve the detention if you can tell me why it was racist. Don't want my son to be racist, right? If he has been racist, fine. But then you've got to apply the same standard of hypersensitivity across all things. Using the name Jesus Christ, for example, would be offensive to me, but I don't jump down everybody's throat over it. I accept that people are different, and that's a habit, and people don't do it out of malice.
And is the matter now settled? That you didn't have to do the detention? Has the school effectively backed down?
Yes, the school kind of backed down, and they still haven't explained why the joke is racist. And
well, they haven't exactly backed down. What they've done is put it on a sort of hiatus. They basically ignored it for now, but potentially the detention's hanging there.
Right. Yes.
Now, I don't really care about the detention. What I care about is the justice of them telling me what the rules are, and applying them evenly over all offences, not just the ones they cherry-pick.
I mean, you'd hope they wouldn't take books out of the library, but the answer is if they don't like the books in the library, they shouldn't be there in the first place.
No, I think that. I think that if the joke was racist, which it's not, then they shouldn't have the book in the library.
They shouldn't have the book in the library. They shouldn't have racist books in the library.
But, of course, if you're hypersensitive, you end up burning the entire library.
Look, Andre and Greg, thank you very much for coming in. I hope you don't get in trouble for coming and being interviewed by me. If you do, you'll have to come back. Thank you very much. GB News has contacted Andre's school for comment, and we await its reply. Shortly, to mark the death of the legendary novelist Frederick Forsyth, we will be playing his last ever interview, which was on this very programme.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country. There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor. Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, we were talking about free speech, and I had a remarkable young gentleman on the programme, and the mail mogs have come in. One viewer says, good for that young man standing up for himself, and his dad too. And Samuel says, at a time when young boys are hardly reading at all, they should be congratulated for picking up a book, not chastised. And Kate says, his dad is right. Teachers have been indoctrinated into the left-wing narrative, brainwashed, and unable to see reason. I just think it's remarkable that a 12-year-old has the courage to come on national television and impress us all. I think all my viewers would have thought he was a really very remarkable young man with, I hope, a glittering future ahead of him. Last night, it was sadly announced that the legendary novelist and journalist Frederick Forsyth had died at the age of 86. The man, perhaps best known for his work, The Day of the Jackal, transformed the thriller genre and will be remembered for writing more than 20 books and selling tens of millions of copies in 30 languages. Just so happened that his last ever interview aired on this programme, so tonight we wanted to bring it back to the airwaves in his honour. We begin by discussing his best-known work, The Day of the Jackal. The Day of the Jackal was the first of many successful books that...
I did 16, 17, yes, over the period.
Which have given enormous pleasure to people. Well, and you have such an insight into the secret world, the world of spies, and the world of criminals. And this came from your journalistic experience.
It did, indeed. And the one thing journalism taught me was how to research. And go, I mean, basically, find the expert and say, sit down with him and say, no, come on, just tell me, how do you do this? How do you do that? It's surprising how open experts in their own field will be. There's a kind of pride, even if it's illegality, a perverse pride, but pride on how to fool the system, so to speak. So that's what I do.
And sometimes you could get the advice from criminals because criminals would speak to journalists in a way they wouldn't speak to anybody else.
Right. Yep. Well, I got cooperation from both officialdom and the underworld.
And you were going back and forth across the Iron Curtain as a journalist, and in a time when it was being closely watched by every secret service in the world. And I've seen in the Times diary that you did this by pretending to be Bertie Wooster, who is one of my great heroes. I'm an absolute P.G. Woodhouse fanatic. So tell me about your time as Bertie Wooster.
It was a question of how to cope. When I arrived in East Berlin, I was appointed East Berlin, Russia correspondent for East Berlin, and the only, after the building of the wall, the only Western correspondent who retained a position in East Berlin was the Reutermann. Everybody else was withdrawn. So there I was with the dreaded Stasis, the Staatssicherheitsdienst, for short Stasis, East German secret police are a very nasty crew, and they really they'd got an enormous manpower, only one target. So I thought, I'm going to be followed, and I was followed on the street, followed. My flat bugged, my office bugged, my car followed, and so on. And I thought there's only one way to cope with this if you're not going to have a nervous breakdown, and that is take the mickey. So, which is the one lingo they did not have. They had no grip of humour whatsoever. So I thought the only way is to fool them by fooling them. So whenever I was picked up or in their hands, I put on this act of benign, eager to please, hopeless, helpless, hapless idiot. Bertie Wooster, in other words. Terrible German, very, very poor accent, poor vocabulary, grammar, the lot. And very eager to please, but a congenital fool. And I named him Bertie Wooster. And the Stasis thought that was me. As soon as the red and white pole dropped behind my car, I could drive away and drop that and become a German, because I could pass for German in German. So in East Germany, that meant I could disappear, which drove them potty with frustration.
So they thought you were a fool, therefore you went through, they weren't following you as closely as they should have done, you therefore escaped and could speak to lots of contacts and find out what was really going on in Eastern Germany.
That's what I used to do.
And did this have an impact on your political views? Because I think you and I have a very similar view of politics.
Well, certainly anti-communist.
Or were you already quite conservative at that point?
I think I was probably raised as a conservative voter, but I didn't vote. I don't think. I went to the Air Force. There wasn't a vote. I was abroad for years. But it wasn't so much that. It was more dictatorship. I came to have a passionate dislike of all forms of dictatorship, which is a form of governmental brutality. And I only lived in one fascist for a while. I was 3 months in Spain, which under Franco was presumably phalangist, i.e. fascist. But that was a regime where they more or less left you alone unless you insisted on making trouble. Whereas in communism, under communism, it was hourly. The surveillance was total. The bugging and the following and the refusal to accept the slightest hint of, what should I call it, opposition to the governmental system. That was a dictatorship. I lived under, well, I saw the communism in Czechoslovakia, in Hungary, in East Germany, and I just came to dislike it.
And when you came back, you must have been of great interest to the British Secret Services, because you would have seen so much and been able to move in a way that they couldn't. How did you balance that with keeping your independence as a journalist?
Basically, I suppose I can say it now because the Cold War is long over, abolished by Gorbachev, I suppose, about 1990. But back then, in the days of the Cold War, which was 45 years, 1945 to 1990, and took up most of the life of my generation, this is a Cold War. The Cold War was dangerous. Had it gone hot, we'd all be wasted. But even without it, and twice it became very close to a nuclear war. But even without it, we still had to win that war. We'd have ended up under a communist dictatorship. Eventually, we did win it. The West won it. The Soviet Union was abolished, and world communism was abolished by Gorbachev. And that was the end of the Cold War. We then thought we had what called the peace dividend, now of course all replaced by Mr. Putin, but never mind. It's a war we had to win. And so when one was asked to do a small favour for this country, I thought it would be churlish to refuse. So on a number of occasions I was asked to, how should I put it, run errands. The media use the word spy far, far too frequently. The true spy is almost certainly a foreigner. He's inside the structure of the enemy, and he has changed sides and decided to work for us. But occasionally someone has to go in to that situation, pick up a message, a package, deliver or bring it back. I was occasionally used to do that.
But it's quite brave, because as a journalist you didn't have diplomatic immunity.
No.
And the Stasi were not nice people to cross.
No, no. There was no diplomatic cover. And so if you were caught, I was a couple of times. In each case I put on my congenital idiot act and got away with it. But had I never been caught carrying seriously incriminating material on my person, then yes, it would have been a prolonged interrogation involving probably violence and possibly execution.
So, I mean, it is, as I say, a very brave thing to have done without that protection. Perhaps you didn't think about it when you were in your 20s and 30s.
I don't think one thought, oh, I'm going to get caught. One thought, no, I can do this. I can do this. The chances are that they won't spot me, and I'll get in, get the message or deliver the message, whatever, and get back out again. And I mean, touch wood. Is there any wood about? Yes. I'm in my chair. Touch wood. I'd always got away with it.
And to come back to politics, you became quite prominent over the Euro campaign. You were strongly against us joining.
I thought it was
a
bad idea. I'm far from being a Euro or hostile. I'm not, but I do think there's a yawning gulf between cooperation and subordination, and the terms that we finally, under Heath, accepted an entry into the EU were so penal that they put us in a subordinate position. That I didn't agree with. It was rather typical that we had an opportunity of going in as a founder member. We rejected it. Our Foreign Office once again got it completely wrong and rejected entry in 1956 when we could have gone in as one of the 7 founder members, and absolutely the presiding and dominating founder member. The others at the time were Germany, still making up for the Second World War. France then is still involved in Algeria. Italy in her habitual chaos, and the 3 Benelux states too small really to count. We could have been the president of the EU. But no, we rejected that and waited. Then came de Gaulle, who of course refused point blank to have us under any circumstances. He finally retired from office. His successor, Pompidou, who was his loyal colleague, finally agreed to let us in. It was a question of letting us in, but under penal terms. And that was why I said, when the moment came, no, we should get out.
One final question. You said when we sat down you've got some mementos on the wall. I can't help noticing a great collection of daggers. What are the daggers?
Oh, I don't know. It was a much younger man. I began to collect them. I mean, there are kukris from the Gurkhas and various things from Africa. I just found them and collected them. Those are the kukris. One kukri over there, and some from the Arab world and from West Africa.
Well, I think anybody would be very ill-advised to try and burgle this particular house. Frederick Forsyth, thank you very much. It's been such a pleasure. They say you should never meet your heroes, but actually I met you some years ago, and it is a pleasure to meet one of one's heroes again.
Thank you. And same here.
Thank you. Well, that is very sad. Freddie Forsyth was a wonderful man, a model Englishman. He was brave, he was patriotic, he was successful, he was intelligent. He is a great loss to this country. Requiem aeternam Dane Domine, lux perpetua lucete, requiescat in pacem. Amen. Up next, it's the one and only Patrick Christys. Patrick, what have you got on your programme this evening?
Well, an absolutely fantastic show, Jacob. Thank you very, very much. Loads on this evening. Anti-immigration protests erupt in Northern Ireland. Have our politicians basically turned Britain into a powder keg due to mass migration? I've got an exclusive for you later on. A Christian patient claims that he was forced out of a hospital chapel by, he puts it, Muslim doctors. What on earth is going on there? Sir Sadiq Khan, really? What's he been knighted for? Services to failure. And of course, from 11 p.m. until midnight, it's a brand new show, Patrick Christie's Tonight, late edition. The very first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, what's inside the book. We're also looking at your regionals, and of course we'll take any big breaking news as well. Get ahead of the game. I'll see you after the weather.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here with the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Clear skies overnight for most of us, followed by a warm and sunny Wednesday, but with increasing humidity, always the chance of some thunderstorms later on. Now, at the moment, the weather patterns are shifting around, and as a result, we'll see high pressure move into the south, clearing the skies, although some low cloud will remain across the far south and southwest, and some cloud will return to Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Outbreaks of mostly light rain and drizzle for the Outer Hebrides. For the vast majority, however, it is a clear and dry nights, and under those clear skies, temperatures will fall into the mid-single figures in places, so certainly a cool start to Wednesday. Plenty of sunshine, however, bright skies for much of Scotland, but for the northwest, I think we'll start the day with low cloud and outbreaks of rain and drizzle. That is going to clear through the morning. Northern Ireland, likewise, a lot of cloud, particularly across western areas, some early sunshine for Belfast, but widely across England and Wales, we've got the sunshine from the word go, except south of the M4 corridor, where we do have some lingering cloud. Now, that's going to lift and break, and some of it will drift north through the morning, so patches of cloud here and there, but on the whole, England, Wales, central, southern and eastern Scotland, bright skies. And with a change in wind direction, we're going to see those temperatures shoot up. 25 Celsius widely, 26 or 27 in a few spots, particularly through the Midlands and into northwest England. But with humidity climbing, we're going to see some thunderstorms arrive in from the west on Wednesday night. And that will turn into a more general area of rain, reaching western parts of the UK during Thursday. It tends to fizzle away, but there'll be some very wet weather towards the northwest in particular. Into Friday, further thunderstorms are likely, although in the east it will be